Good afternoon, Alice. So it's a great pleasure to have Alice Harlock here, Technical Director at OPRL. And hello, good afternoon.
Hi, Mark. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you for taking the time. So we're going to have a chat. We're going to talk about a few things, and then, and what we normally do is, we don't really waste time. We just dive in. So so I think to start with, Alice, you're the technical director at OPRL. Can you just give us a little kind of, I don't know, a little elevator pitch of who you are, your company, and perhaps its mission and its reason for being?
Absolutely. So, a lot of people will never have heard of us, and people don't know who OPRL are, but you will know what we do because
Yep.
we work with recyclers, retailers, brands, packaging manufacturers to put recycling labels on packaging. So, you might have seen them. There'll be a little kind of like an arrow with a heart on, and it will say
Yes.
recycle, or an arrow with the heart on that's crossed out and it says do not recycle. And that is essentially what we do. So, what we're trying to do is help consumers to do the right thing with their packaging so that the value of the packaging can be fully realised. That packaging isn't just going to be wasted, but it can come back into the system and be turned into something new. And my role as the kind of technical director is to think about what impacts the recyclability of that packaging. So, looking at the infrastructure that we have here in the UK and in the kind of other countries that we use for material reprocessing, thinking about the collections that we have at home, how that material might be sorted, and also the material itself. So, if when you get food packaging, for example, quite often it's got some sort of barrier layer that helps keep that food nice and fresh. So it's looking at all of those things and then making the decisions on what becomes recyclable and what's not
Yep.
recyclable.
Okay. All right. Great. So, I mean, in effect, you're kind of also in the business of affecting or impacting on consumer behavior, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. We are definitely. We started back in 2009, so
Okay.
we've been going over 15 years now. And what we've seen over that time, it's not just kind of how we've grown as an organization. We're close to 1,000 members now, and when we started I think we had 50. So it's going really well. But the other thing that's changed is, as a householder, my recycling collection that I have at home is different. I can now put more materials into my recycling bin.
Yeah.
And I think recycling is much more of a norm for everyone. We're all used to
Definitely.
doing
Yes.
it. It's
Yes.
just part of your daily life, isn't it? It's what you do at home, basically.
It is. You've become, I mean, in the UK, everybody's become used to putting things in the right bins and all that kind of stuff. It was a bit of a struggle at the beginning. I think people are trying to sort of have got used to it. Brilliant. So, in terms of, I mean, are they many people in your space? Is it saturated? Are you very much innovators, or
We are
what's the
we are the
situation?
only recycling labelling scheme in the UK, but we don't work alone because we can't work alone. We work with so many different stakeholders. I talked about the waste management company, so the people
Yeah,
who are collecting the material and
yeah.
sorting it and doing stuff with it. The reprocessors themselves who then turn that material into something new, but also obviously the retailers and the brands, the packaging manufacturers, and then the people who are talking to us as householders. So we talk to the local authorities, we talk to governments about legislation that's coming in. So we're kind of one small part of the big picture to
Picture,
do.
yeah. So
Absolutely.
multiple stakeholders. So you're
Yes.
obviously very much a critical ingredient within the whole thing. So that might bring me to the next question in terms of like complexity. So it's a question of like navigating, complexity. So you talked about talking to the regulators, and so the regulatory landscape for packaging seems quite complex, relatively
Yeah.
complex. There's a lot of noise around it, and it does shift. There's a lot of politics, and there's the
Yeah.
usual thing. The usual suspects saying certain things or whatever. So,
Yeah.
what do you think is some of your challenges facing, or I don't know, in terms of guidance or in terms of keeping to, I don't know, I don't want to say relevance because it'll always be relevant because you're dealing with such an important issue. But in terms of alignment with what's happening with the current trend,
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, and we are a UK based scheme, so our labels apply only to what happens in the UK because we look
right?
at the collections that happen in the UK. But when you think about what happens across the UK, actually, waste is a devolved responsibility. So it's managed by the four different nations. It's not necessarily managed at a UK level, which can add an extra level of complexity to it, like you said. But then the other thing that we need to be very conscious of is, as much as we are a UK scheme, a lot of our members don't just sell in the UK. Brands don't sell just in the UK, they sell across a lot of different markets. So we have to have sight of what's going on in those other countries as well and be mindful of how that legislation and how that regulation might impact what they're trying to do. Because from a producer point of view, from a brand point of view, you don't want to have a different set of packaging for each country. That's
Right.
really
Well, that's not
costly.
going to be I mean, in
Yeah,
terms of commercial, it's a
absolutely.
nightmare. That would be a nightmare, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So you want it to be as streamlined as possible. And I guess part of what we do when we're talking to governments and other organisations as well is think about that alignment. Look at, what's coming out of the EU. We have regular conversations with other labelling schemes across the world. So there's a scheme that operates in North America, a scheme that operates in kind of Australia and New Zealand, and just talking to them about what are they doing and what's happening in their space, which
Yeah.
is often quite similar to what we're experiencing here, and trying to find that alignment where we can really and bring people together.
So, and I know that obviously, the other thing is just to make sure that you keep up with I don't know, the quality in terms of the quality. If you're exporting, a lot of countries, if they, a particular country is synonymous with quality, you've got to sort of like to keep that up. So I guess that
Yeah.
would be part of your remit. So in
Yeah.
terms of consumer outreach, consumer education is key to successful recycling. I know that there was, inevitably this sort of like, you know, do the right thing type of thing. Can you share a recent campaign or initiative where you guys successfully broke through the noise to change how people think
So
about sustainable packaging?
I guess one of the things that we do, like I said, is it's not just about us working on our
Yeah.
own. So there's
Okay.
been a
Yeah.
big piece of work recently on toothpaste tubes. I don't
Okay.
know if you've seen any conversations about it. Toothpaste tubes are made of plastic, and they used to be made of a whole mixture of different polymers, which made them very difficult to recycle. And the industry kind of came together and said, this is not a great idea. Let's do something to improve this. So they have moved to make them made from one type of plastic, so they can be recycled. So that's
Yeah.
really, really positive. So we spoke to the toothpaste manufacturers. We spoke to an organisation called WRAP, who have something called the UK Plastics Pact, and they've been working with the toothpaste manufacturers, helping them kind of make this change to a monomaterial. But also then the communications, thinking about how does that messaging get communicated to the householder, to you and I at home, to say, you can now put your toothpaste tube in the recycling. Obviously, our label can be on the pack, but the other thing was to work with the local authorities who are collecting the material, make sure there's some communication material that they can use then to help get those toothpaste tubes captured, because changing that material to make it recyclable is great, but if we as consumers or householders are not doing the right thing by putting it into the recycling bin, then that material is still going to get lost.
So looking ahead to, let's say for, like future trends, looking ahead to 3, 5 years, what do you believe is the most disruptive trend that you see coming that will fundamentally change how brands approach maybe sustainable packaging?
Oh,
Is that something that,
that's a really good question. It's a really interesting. I think I've got three answers. That's
yeah,
probably not
please,
much use.
let's have them all, please.
So I think there's big, like you said, there's big legislous I can't say that
Legislative.
word.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it. Changes coming. So this big piece of work, regulations around extended producer responsibility for packaging. It's changing the way that the cost of the packaging recovery is paid for, and a lot of that onus is going on to the packaging producers, so the retailers and brands. But it's bringing money into the system, to fund then the collections, and hopefully it will also help improve the infrastructure that we've got. So the focus is going to be on the recyclability of that packaging. How can you make it more recyclable? So I think we will see over time some packaging that we might be seeing at the moment actually being phased out because it's not recyclable, and they're being, the incentive is to move towards something more
Yeah,
recyclable.
more compatible. Yeah.
So that's my first one.
Okay.
My second one is about refill and reuse, which I think we are going to start seeing more of. So when you talk about recycling, it's one of the behaviors you can do, but actually it's better not just to use the energy to turn that packaging into something new. It's better just to refill it as it is, or reuse it as it is. From a kind of a sustainability point of view, refill comes above recycling. And there's a big focus on refill and reuse at the moment. There's a big group that are working together, a group of retailers and different organisations who've been looking at this, and a huge amount of research that's been done recently as well, which I think is really interesting. And then my third area, sorry, having three instead of one, I think we are going to see a lot more coming in the digital space around information and knowledge. So my career, as much as I talk to people about packaging now and packaging recycling, I actually started my career talking to people about recycling. So thinking about how do you communicate recycling messages. And one of the things that we always found when we did research was that people are desperate to know more. We want to know not just about how to recycle something, but what happens to it when it's recycled. Where does it go? How does the process work? But the thing about us as, unique human beings is we don't necessarily want to just get a whole big document with everything in. We want it in nice, small, easy to understand bits of information for us to be able to read or understand when we want to. And I think digital really gives us that opportunity to kind of, you could have a recycling label which has got a QR code or something alongside it that you can then go to get the further information that you want. And that's a real positive opportunity for thinking back to those kind of international markets as well. It gives you that opportunity to use your digital option to provide all that information for the different markets and the different languages without having to create 27 different forms of packaging.
Yeah, excellent. So this is, it's just sort of like falling into place really, because, with so much data coming in, okay, from consumer behavior to material science and everything, how does OPRL ensure that data is collected quickly? Okay, it's not only collected, but once collected, it translates quickly into clear, actionable guidance for your stakeholders.
Yeah, so one of the things that we do, so we actually operate as a membership scheme. So
Yeah,
the
I've seen that.
people who
Okay.
use our labels are members effectively. And what we've done over the years is develop a number of tools then that our members can use. So we have a labeling tool, which kind of does what you just described. So basically our member can put in their packaging data, and in the background we've added the information about the collections, the sorting, the reprocessing. And it basically they put in their packaging data and they then get the label artwork out that they need. So there it is. They can download it, they can put it onto their packaging ready to go. And then it means that us as consumers, we've got that information, we know what we need. And then there's extra steps that we can take. So the other thing that we have is a recyclability assessment tool, which is very similar, but rather than just saying how you label it, it looks at actually how recyclable that packaging is and gives our members information about things that they could do to improve the recyclability. So, thinking about that legislation that I talked about, the EPR legislation, which is based on recyclability, and effectively there's a benefit for having more recyclable packaging, then that's there to kind of help and give them those prompts about those steps that they can take to make it easier.
Okay. Oh, excellent. So obviously, your membership growth is something that should be on the cards. I presume it would be on the cards as the
Absolutely.
word spreads and everything like that. So the
Yeah.
volume. What about, let's say, in terms of the volume of unique member queries? and the need for sort of like customized guidance, will also obviously increase,
Yeah.
proportionally to, to as you increase. So where do you think perhaps that you find friction in scaling or your ability to deliver that personalized, timely advice?
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I think one of the things that we see, I don't know why it is, but I sometimes feel that our members get together and they decide this is the topic we're going to talk about, and then we'll get a run of like 20 questions on one particular packaging format. And I know it's not that, but there are certain things that we tend to find there's almost like trends, like the conversations this week are going to be about butter wraps, or the conversations this week are going to be about toothpaste tubes, and it kind of goes in those kind of trends. And I think so the important thing for us is, you're right, being able to provide that personalized service is great, but also we need to look at what those trends are, and we need to identify those common areas. And sometimes, actually, if we can preempt what our members going to ask us by providing that information up front, then that's definitely a way that we can help them
Yeah.
and also help us, based in the thought that, like you said, we are looking to be more efficient with the way that we work, so that as membership grows, we can maintain the level of service that we've got.
So it's a question of like being able to anticipate and being able to, yeah,
Yeah,
segmentation,
yeah,
anticipation. Yeah, yeah, it's a delicate thing, isn't it? It's a delicate thing. It can be anyway. So let's say,
absolutely.
for instance, if you could eliminate one repetitive high volume task that perhaps currently consumes, perhaps significant time in your technical or outreach teams, what would it be?
So I have
Sorry about this.
no, that's fine. And I'm going to sound really horrible.
Oh, right.
I've got two teenage boys.
Oh yeah, I know teenagers. I know
So the common
I can see
question
the
in
frowns. Yeah, it's like
yeah, the common
the
question
wrinkles.
in our house is, where's my
Yeah.
and normally my first answer is, have you tried looking for it? Which is, the answer
Or
is
where did
definitely
you
no.
last put it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. And I think for me, sometimes I think, I know sometimes if you're thinking about something and you're working on something and you think, oh, I'm not sure about this,
yeah,
I just want the answer. And it can be
yeah,
a lot easier for people just to go, oh, I'll just ask the question rather than go and look for it myself. And sometimes I'd like to, we never would, but this whole thing about helping our members navigate the information we've got is how do you make it accessible and easy, for them to be able to access whenever they want, because we are not here 24/7. We're a small organization, and we work your standard office hours basically, but our website is there all the time, and so the information is there for them all the time. So it's how we can help them be able to navigate it and find it, to then reduce those questions of going, oh, by the way, where's this, because they found it already.
yeah.
That's what I'd like.
But that'd be sort of part. Obviously, that would be an onboarding thing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think so, but it's not just because, it's kind of onboarding, but I'm like
Yes.
this. You
Yeah.
go and do your Excel training and you come away thinking, oh, I know everything there is to know about macros or
Until
whatever.
you
And
get.
then you don't use it
Yeah.
for 3 months and you
That's
completely
it.
forget.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a bit of everything, isn't it? It's that the
Yes.
knowledge that you get up front, but also how we help them then find it again when they need it.
Yeah. So the second sort of like pivot on that particular question is that if what would you do with the extra time, or what would your team do with the extra time that they would gain if those particular problems that you were talking about, the memberships was, like scaling and looking at, oh, how do you do this or this, you know, if you didn't have, or your team didn't have effort in that particular rabbit hole, where would you put that effort?
So, what's really important for us is that we provide a good service to our members. And so, one of the things that we've been looking to do this year is think about the ways that we communicate with our members, and look at broader opportunities. So, we do things like webinars, we do newsletters, but it's taking those and thinking just a little bit more differently. It's about thinking about, is some little mini podcasts, for example? Is there some pre recorded videos? How else can we make that information accessible? And the other thing that we like to do, or we try to do, is really look at the legislation that's out there and
Yeah.
understand what that means for our members, because legislation is not always the most easy thing to understand. I don't know if you've ever had the privilege of reading. Yeah. They're not short documents. There's a lot of words in there, and they're written in a certain style, which is not necessarily always very easy to read. So for us, it's about how can we take that information then and interpret it so that our members have got an easy to access version, and they get exactly what they need, when they need it, rather than trying to wade through loads of pages.
That's one thing about legislation, is that even the people who write it, they sort of like get the impression that nobody's going to read it anyway. So,
Yeah.
but I know what you're saying. So, which is, I mean, this is uncanny, because my next question is like when a new piece of legislation or material innovation is introduced, what does the internal workflow look like for updating all your relevant guidance, and what's the biggest, what are the loopholes in this particular process? Obviously people not reading it. Yeah, people not
Yeah,
reading.
people not reading it. But the other thing that we've got with the legislation that we're dealing with at the moment is actually that there's something in the extended producer responsibility for packaging.
Yeah,
There's a methodology that's being used to determine recyclability, which is called the recyclability assessment methodology. No prizes for naming, but there we go. And the challenge that we've had with that is that they've produced updated versions of that, but because of the complexity of it all, some of the things that they were thinking to include, they've taken out and said we're going to come back to that. So we're expecting another version to come out next year, basically. So it's not just how we communicate this to our members, but also how we say this is where we're at the moment, but this is not the final version. So don't kind of take this as read. You've got to be mindful that there's something else that's coming later on. We don't know what that's going to look like yet, but so it's a
well,
real
it's a question
challenge.
of like, yeah, it's a question of sort of like, fragmentation,
Yeah,
fragmenting the information and sort of like sending it out at the pertinent time, at the
yeah,
appropriate time, to sort
and
of balance everything up. Yeah,
yeah, and also really importantly for us, it's about making sure that our members are aware that this is not the final
the final
version, that
thing.
there are changes coming, and we now have an indication of the timeline for those changes, so we communicate that as well. And I think sometimes it's just about making sure that people are talking about it and they know it's
Right.
coming.
So
And
it's
the
soon as
more
it
you do that,
yeah,
that's the important thing.
yeah. Okay, fantastic. So measuring success, beyond sort of like membership numbers and everything like that, what is the key internal metric that you track right now that tells you OPRL is operating at peak efficiency?
So for us, different things. There's the consumer side.
Yeah,
We do the research to make sure that consumers understand, see, act on the labels, all of that. So keeping that consumer recognition of the labels is really important. But then also for us, it's about getting new members, but it's also about retaining our members. So making sure that our members are using the labels, consumers are getting the information they need, but also that we are supporting our members in making those recyclability decisions that they need to make.
I think one of the things, I mean, in all business, really, in terms of when you're sort of like, well, I would say getting new members is a sort of like a conversion, is that
Mm,
what people find is as soon as you've been converted, right, on the back foot, you're looking for more converts. And then those particular recent converts are not supported, or they,
mm.
things sort of like go cold a little bit. Yeah, it seems to be a pattern anyway. So the gap between vision and reality. So you talked about the future of sustainable packaging. What is the single biggest technical or operational gap between your current state and where you're going to go, or where you want to go?
That's a really good question. Um, I think there's a big thing, and you won't be surprised about this. There's a big thing about data and the role that data has to play in all of this. Certainly in the world of packaging generally, there's a real kind of revolution at the moment looking at packaging data and where the holes are. But we're also then thinking about the data that we get from our members and how can we use that to help our members to be more efficient in what they're doing, as well as making sure that we're working more efficiently. So that's definitely a big area for us, is about being, what's the word I'm looking for, being kind of wise and sensible with the data that you've got, and
Being
making the most
pertinent.
of it
Yeah.
for you and for, you know, the people that you work with,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah. No, that's really interesting. So let's say, for instance, are there any kind of new up and coming things that you have on the horizon? Any events or any things that OPRL are going to do? I know that you're out there.
Yeah.
You're a bright sort of like company out there. So anything
So
else coming up?
yeah, so we're in a slightly quiet period now, but we're building up towards our big exhibition in February, which is called Packaging Innovations, which is at the NEC in Birmingham. We're there. We've got a stand. We're sponsoring a stage. I'll be doing, hoping to do a panel session actually on the stage, thinking about what's coming in the world of labelling, looking at what's coming from Europe and the impact of the legislation there. So that'd be really exciting. But also for us, we're having a real focus on our tools at the moment. So kind of internally, that kind of the technology that sits behind them, how can we make sure that they are as fit for purpose as they can be and are future ready, basically. You know, we're
Yeah,
thinking about that as well, looking at what's coming, what do we need to change. So those are getting out and talking to people, but then making sure those core services are working the best that they
right.
can do.
Oh, excellent. So there's a lot to look forward to. There's a lot of great things on the horizon. So let's say, as we're wrapping up, as we wrap up, what is one piece of advice you'd give to organizations perhaps that are just starting this journey or starting their journey towards truly sustainable operations? Because I presume that's perhaps one of the goals one of the
Yeah,
reasons for being. Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you need to be really clear on what you're trying to achieve, but also don't be afraid to kind of be really ambitious. You know, you talk about our mission, and actually our written mission is a world where packaging goes to waste. And we know that, you know, that's not something that we can achieve on our own, but we can play a part in making that happen. And so I think that that's one thing I would say. Don't be afraid of aiming big, and realizing that you've got to collaborate to achieve it.
excellent. Brilliant. Thank you, Alice.
No
It's been a
worries.
great 30 minutes. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to talking to you very soon. Take care.
Brilliant. Thanks,
Bye.
Mark.
Bye.
Bye.